The Out of Bounds Show podcast is powered by the DeWalt tools at Ace Bolt and Screw. Visit acebolt.net for a location near you.
WRKS Pickens Jackson.
All systems go.
Live from the Whiskey 61 Lounge inside the Bank Plus studio.
This is Out of Order.
Live in the studio. It's the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Streaming live worldwide on the Out of Bounds radio app. And on your radio at ESPN 105.9.
All set? Let's go.
The Zone.
Good morning. Welcome in. Good morning. Good morning. True Maroon says, morning, guys. What's happening, True Maroon? Welcome into the Out of Bounds Show. Morning drive for the state of Mississippi. ESPN 105.9 The Zone. WRKS. Streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. Hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Weather was amazing. Wasn't it? Golly, we needed that. We are loaded up today on the show. Lot of college baseball and SEC football, and then we'll wrap it up a little late with some sports gambling and NFL and all that kind of good stuff. Got a cool guest coming out of Las Vegas in the third hour I'll tell you more about. Our guests do join us on the Modelo guest line. Steve Robertson will join us at 7:35 on the very, very, very disappointing weekend in Starkville, Mississippi, as Hail State baseball loses 2 of 3 to the worst team in the league, and that would be Missouri. Then we'll have Parrish Alford at 8 a.m., Ole Miss Insider, djournal.com, as Ole Miss flips the script and takes 2 of 3 from the Vanderbilt Commodores. And I think they've now punched their ticket for hosting, and things look good in Oxford. They'll go to Georgia, and the Dogs will go to Tuscaloosa in what now are huge road series for the Dogs and the Rebs. So Steve Robertson at 7:35, Parrish Alford at 8, Tom Luganbill, national college football analyst with ESPN, at 8:30. And Blake, what do we have at 9:30?
Yes, we are going to Las Vegas. We're going to talk to gambling expert with covers.com. His name is Patrick Everson. And
cool.
They do, like, I guess you could call it a little bit of
I wonder if I've ever met him on my trips to Vegas.
I don't know. But he's a hot, like, it's not necessarily handicapping, it's like trends and numbers and odds. It does have handicapping to do with that as well, but it's a lot of different things. They really go in depth on, like, what moves the needle when it comes to NFL wins and losses. And we're going to talk about how the draft and Aaron Rodgers and things like that have affected Super Bowl odds already for 2021 and things like that. So it'll be interesting.
All of our guests join us on the Modelo guest line. I'm hoping to have dinner with Tony Vitello and Dave Van Horn at the SEC baseball tournament, but not sure. I'll let y'all know on that if we're going to work through that and, break some bread. Well, they may break some other stuff, but, lock into a big meal and see what they have to say. That was fun yesterday as they jawed at each other. Former assistant to head coach at Arkansas, and now Tony Vitello is at Tennessee and doing a great job, but I liked it. Let's get more of that. And several different ways that you can hit us up. Farm Bureau Insurance call-in line, 601-707-3750. It's been a while since we've been in studio. Twitter handle, @BoBounds. Brought to you by Ace Bolt and Screw, powered by DeWalt Tools. New retail location, Gluckstadt, Madison County. And did we get anything on the Mississippi Ag text line? Oh, goodness gracious. Yes, we did. The Mississippi Ag John Deere tractor text line, your reaction to the weekend is 601-885-3776. I was on remote Thursday and Friday, and now we're back in the Bank Plus studio. I do want to let everybody know that we have Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Saints insider, Jeff Duncan, New Orleans Saints insider, coming in studio tomorrow. And Jeff just wrote the book, Peyton and Breeze, The Men Who Built the Greatest Offense in NFL History. We've got a few more spots left, right, for lunch tomorrow, Blake?
Yes, sir.
All right. So if you're a big Houdat fan and you want in, text, shoot us a text. We'll see how it all falls here. We're trying to do a count, as Jeff will do a lot of the show with me tomorrow. And then we're going to host, around 20 people up here for lunch. If you want to buy a book and have him personally sign it to you or a friend, client, dad, whoever, that'll work out. It'll be great. We're going to go to dinner with Jeff tonight. Look forward to that. He'll tell us more stories about spending time with Breeze and Peyton.
I can't wait to read that book.
Me too. Just his stories that he's told us to date are pretty cool and awesome. And Bartu's story on Friday was great. And the podcast was, thank you for hitting the our podcast on Apple Podcast. Search the Out of Bounds Show. Let's get into it. So Ole Miss with a monster that, they weren't necessarily part of the 16 going in. They could have been,
yeah,
but nothing's a given. I mean, you're dealing with a bunch of humans. It's subjective, blah, blah, blah. So, your hands are in with the committee who knows what they're thinking and, where they're from and whatever and what they're looking at and all that. And so Ole Miss takes 2 of 3 against Vanderbilt. They knock off Kumar Rocker. Nikhazy was amazing on Friday. And then they come back and win on Saturday, in which they just, they put up a 10 spot in the third inning and just boom, 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 and continued to hit the baseball and get out of there with 2 of 3 against, how good is Jacob Gonzalez, against the Vanderbilt Commodores. So now they feel good. Hey, we're going to host. Now, let me ask you this. What else are they playing for this weekend, depending on what happens in front of them? They go over to Georgia and do some things. I don't think it's a given that Mississippi State's going to hang on to their national seed. And we'll see what Florida does. But there's a lot going on here. And Tennessee losing yesterday to Arkansas. There's a lot of moving parts going into the final weekend. And so that was a monster series win for Ole Miss. And Nikhazy really set the tone on Friday and did a great job. He's he's the best starting pitcher in the state, obviously. And then you moved to Starkville, and that was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series in which Hail State baseball was fortunate to
not get swept.
Yes. They didn't do anything that really impressed you other than Landon Sims on Thursday night. And then Friday they laid an egg, and Saturday they laid an egg. Now, were they exposed, or was it a bad weekend? I think that's going to be the big hot take debate for the week going into traveling eventually to, now they've got a non-conference game scheduled, which at this point they can't drop. But if it even goes, they canceled last week's. And as they travel to Alabama, were they exposed, or did they have a bad weekend?
Can I ask?
And now I've been asking questions for weeks that a lot of people, I don't think, have really taken into account, Blake. I mean, I've been really questioning some things, and yet you hear people go, well, it's, smoothing over this. I mean, how good is the front line pitching? How good is it? How good has it really looked? You just take like the last 9 to 10 weeks as a whole. And then are your holes in your batting lineup too much to overcome? Jake Gautreaux, MSU baseball, and Brad Henderson, Ole Miss baseball, have used the word scuffling. Haven't they been scuffling now for a while? I don't know. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, powered by the Golden Moon Casino Sportsbook. and award-winning Dancing Rabbit Golf Club. Welcome in, welcome in. The Mississippi Ag text line. Want to hear from you. 601-885-3776. The Out of Bounds Show podcast is brought to you by Boar's Head. Premium meats, cheeses, and hummus. Boar's Head. Compromise elsewhere.
What's on the big board? What's on the big board?
All right. Good morning. Want to hear from you. Mississippi Ag John Deere Tractor text line 601-885-3776. Want to welcome you in. Hope you're doing well. Thanks for making us your sports and entertainment show of choice in the great state of Mississippi. We're loaded up today on the Modelo guest line. Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, 735. GenesPage.com. Parrish Alford, Ole Miss Insider, 8 a.m. DJournal.com. Tom Luganville, 8:30. Heavy quarterbacks, SEC football, and the like. And then in the third hour, Blake?
Yes.
Patrick Emerson with Covers.com.
Everson, but yes.
Everson. You know, it's scary when I can't even read my own handwriting.
So, well, you have terrible hand.
It's awful.
When you try, when Ashley came in to read those reads and you handed her this sheet and she was like, "Is this Chinese? Like, what did you write down?" You're like, "Let me clean that up." Couldn't read one of them. Yeah, he'll talk a little NFL betting and stuff like that, Super Bowl odds, all that good stuff. I do have a question. You know, it's funny you said heavy quarterbacks. Is it bad that I immediately think Rohan Davey and the hefty lefty? I don't think we're going to talk a lot of quarterbacks. I think we're going to talk about quarterbacks who are a lot.
Let me give you this little nugget. The Ole Miss win yesterday gave Mississippi State a +1 in the RPI.
How about that?
So they went from sitting at 8 to 7. They're now in a safer spot for a national host, barring a collapse at Alabama, which I have no idea. I mean, this team, they have a great record. They have a really good conference record.
I'd have to see when the last time a 20-win team in the SEC wasn't
I don't think
in
they're
that
sweeping,
national.
but I see where you're going. I think if they take 2 or 3 this weekend, they'll be fine.
Yep.
And obviously the SEC tournament doesn't matter. I guess they're going to try to get some bats going. Because they've got, at least 5 no-shows in the lineup right now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you feel like your
that
first
may have
two
been
guys.
generous. Is it 6 no-shows?
Your first 2 guys are hitting well, and then I guess Logan Tanner
Right.
are your 3 that you feel like somewhat comfortable
So
about.
you feel good about your 1, 2, and is
And
Logan
4.
4?
5. He's after
Yeah.
Hancock.
And after that, how about this? After that crew
Yep.
of Tanner Allen and Rowdy Jordan and Logan Tanner,
Yep.
how good do you really feel about your lineup?
Of those 6, how many do you feel can get the at-bat when you need it, right?
Right.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
I'd say maybe 2. Maybe 2 of them you feel confident about getting the at-bat. Like, I think people think Hancock's going to put it in play. Whether or not he's safe is up to debate. But at least he's been so low strikeout, he's always been able to put it in play, so you feel good about that. After that, everybody else, like you said, it seems to be kind of searching for it, to put it lightly.
Okay. And what about the infield as a whole? What? I'm asking these questions. Why would we not?
Who's more anxious?
I mean, if it somebody gets upset over it, then they can get upset.
Who's more anxious?
Or get on Twitter.
Ole Miss football fans when a pass is thrown against their defense, or Mississippi State baseball fans when a ground ball is hit in the infield?
I understand that hitting trumps fielding, but when you put that much pressure on your staff, your pitching staff, every weekend, my question is, I think we've been talking about this for about 10 weeks. They're going to come around. So my question for you is, why do you believe that now? mean, what? And also, what about the approach? I mean, they didn't look like they were interested in being there. Now, I understand you can't get up for all 56 games. I understand. But it was almost like all 25 checked out. So my question is, were you exposed, or was it a bad weekend, or is it always a combination of several different things, and it's not black and white, and there's a bunch of gray?
There's definitely a bunch of gray. I guess your concern is you'd be more concerned if you had lost the games and you actually looked like you played hard. I guess your one saving grace, if you're a State fan, is to write this series off as your team was more interested in having fun this weekend than playing baseball, and you hope that this is the wake-up call walking into the playoffs that you need. You know, football coaches like to use that all the time. You lose that Week 16 game in the NFL, wake-up call, something like that.
I don't really believe in that, but
it's
there
thing.
Could be something to that.
It's a
or
thing.
We think it is. We throw it out in
That's
sports.
what I'm saying. Like it's something we say. Just like it's hard to beat a team 3 times, right? Which we've determined isn't actually the case.
Right, because the NFL numbers you gave me in November, December.
Detillier did a whole interview on it.
Exactly.
When the Saints lost to Tampa.
So the things that we as guys throw around at the bar, the patio, and the hunting camp,
some are true,
most
some
of
are
them
wrong.
are not.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'd say most of them are built on false cliches, right?
Right.
Maybe a sliver of truth that gets expounded into this big thing.
And I think at this point, you are who you are.
As part, you are what your record says you are, right?
Bill Part. Now,
yeah,
they have a good record.
so what does that mean? Are we judging them on the eye test or the record test, right?
Right, the gut, right?
Your gut tells you right now. If I ask you, we don't know where they're going to play.
No. But let's just cut to the chase.
Are they making it to Omaha?
Are they built to go to Omaha?
That's the
say
question.
No.
You would say no.
Yeah.
If I give you one,
could they make it? My God, the 2007 team made it, Blake, and that team was not a good baseball team.
Okay, either, neither, or both. State or Ole Miss. Either, neither, both. Omaha. Either makes it, both make it, or neither.
I don't see it either team right now.
So neither of them make it.
But then I could talk myself into the fact that a lot of these teams we thought were going to dominate, Vandy and Florida, they're not much better than Mississippi State or Ole Miss.
Vanderbilt is on a skid.
Right.
The only team playing well week in and week out is Arkansas. Correct.
But and Tennessee gave them all they wanted, but you also have to give Arkansas credit for winning the games.
Well, it's like 2 straight weekends they've been given all they want, but they come out with 2 wins every time.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
That's the difference. Do they get challenged? Yes. Are they winning every game by 10? No. But are they winning?
Oh, and I'm not worried about that kind of that fans get into. It's got to look pretty.
No,
Bama does. That's not how people win championships.
No,
Duke, Bama,
and
New
Arkansas
England Patriots
is built to get there.
San Antonio Spurs. It's a grind. All of it's a grind. There's no, Skittles and cupcakes and balloons throughout the season. It's hard. It's a grind. Do I think they're good teams? Yeah. I guess could they get hot and do this thing? They could. I'm not sure though, Blake. I've got a lot of. I think that Hail State puts so much pressure on their pitching to come up big, starting, mid relief, and closing. You feel like it's every single game because they just can't really get going at the plate, or they do a combo of not getting going at the plate and then booting the ball around the field, which we're told in the big scheme of things kind of works its way out if you get on base.
The issues are, it seems like when the offense clicks, the defense falls apart and puts more pressure on the pitching staff. Okay. It's like the few times that you get run support, you're giving up too many runs.
Yeah. Ole Miss, Nikhazy's phenomenal. And then, we have some question marks there. We just do. And it's not anybody's fault. I mean, they lose, Hoagland and some other pieces. We'll see. You know what? They have more work to do in the SEC tournament as far as just getting some guys going. Not worried about W's and L's, but Hail State and Ole Miss, to me, have some work to do. They've got guys at the plate and on the mound that need innings and at bats and so on. to hopefully parlay that in the next weekend in the regionals, which will be in Oxford and Starkville, to do what you want to do. So we'll see. The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Steve Robertson, 7:35 on the Modelo guest line. Welcome in. Good morning. The Out of Bounds Show podcast is presented by Edwin Watts Golf Shop on County Line Road. Your golf game starts with Edwin Watts Golf Shop.
Ready?
This is the SEC Insider Hit. Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance Agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
Oh, good morning. Wild weekend in the SEC. Ole Miss takes 2 of 3 from the Commodores. And I feel like they punched their ticket to host a regional. Mississippi State loses 2 of 3 to Missouri, the worst team in the league. It was a no-show weekend. Let's just call it like we see it. They're still hanging on to a national seed, but they better be really, really careful going into the last weekend against Alabama. You got to have 2 of 3 this weekend. And we'll see if they get locked in and interested. You know, for senior weekend and at home, and you only have so many opportunities at Duty Noble Field, that was laying an egg. And I recognize that, you know, it's hard to win. Most SEC schools can, you know, win a game here or there. I recognize that. But I'm still going to ask the question throughout the morning. Were they exposed, or is it just a bad weekend? Are you chalking it up to I think there's a lot of questions to be raised. Both teams, but one's coming off winning 2 of 3 against the Vanderbilt has emerged as the number 1 program in the SEC over LSU the last decade. Now, you know, LSU's still a monster and whatever. You would think they'll get their house back in order. But this has been a revolving door with Vanderbilt, Florida, and LSU. But, you know, Vandy has kind of punched their ticket to the number 1 program in the Southeastern Conference. I know we all know about the scholarship stuff, but the bottom line is they win a lot, too. They did not dominate this year like we thought they would, and neither did Florida. But Arkansas has, pretty much. You know, you got to get, even though most of you don't like Van Horn, and maybe even Tony Vitello. And I don't know if you watched that yesterday, but after the Arkansas-Tennessee series, in which Arkansas took 2 or 3, but it was, you know, very competitive and big-time competition. Tony Vitello, who spent 4 seasons, Blake, under Dave Van Horn.
That's correct.
And Dave Van Horn, so they've coached together, were jawing for a while. And even thought maybe some of the players were going to mix it up, but they got it settled down. And I don't know, maybe they'll meet again. We'll see. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. And the Farm Bureau Insurance call-in line is 601-707-3750. We'll take calls at 8:15. We're about to go 45 minutes of interviews. So 601-707-3750. If you want to get up, get on the phone with us. 8:15 is going to be your time, because then we go into another 23-minute interview with Tom Luganbill at 8:30. So Steve Robertson coming up in a couple of minutes. Parrish Alford at 8 a.m. and Tom Luganbill at 8:30. Do you think that 4 coaches in 4 years may have somewhat caught up with the Mississippi State baseball program? That the lack of continuity to recruit, because, you know, so many of these kids are committing in 9th grade, right? 10th grade. And so you go through Cohen, Canizero, Henderson, and Lemonis. And you went through that whole stretch where you were able to, like, gloss over it, right? I mean, you could have easily fallen apart, but you went to 4 super regionals and 2 college World Series. So at a time when you should have Ole Miss should have taken advantage of that, having a coach there for 20 years and having continuity and seeing kids, right? 8th, 9th, 10th graders, knowing what's going on, knowing who you want for this class, and this class. Would have taken advantage of that time as Mississippi State was on somewhat shaky ground trying to figure out a coach that was going to be there for more than 12 months. And so I think it is a question to be asked. I did throw it out on Twitter. Could you have missed in some recruiting because you went through just a ton of coaches? And a lot of the other teams in the league, had the same guys. I don't know. Something to think about, right? Live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Nick says it was errors and nothing from the bottom of the lineup that caught up with MSU. I think it's more than that. I also think you got to question, some of your pitching too. And what do you really have? I mean, you got some guys that are really good, but maybe there's been a little too much made of how deep you are as far as the pitching staff. And the frontline pitching's got to step up. That's for sure. McLeod, Bednar, and I guess Fristo. Again, live in the Bank Plus studio, the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. And this segment is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Hit favorites.com, bundle your auto and home, and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Baseball Insider, the Boneyard Podcast, and GenesPage.com. He joins us on the Modelo guest line. Steve, was the Mississippi State baseball team exposed this weekend, or do you just chalk it up as a bad weekend, or a combination of the two?
Well, I think it is a combination of the two. I still think this is a really good baseball team. I think they had a really bad weekend, and I think a lot of it kind of stems with overconfidence. I mean, Tanner Allen and Rowdy Jordan both admitted in postgame Thursday and Friday night, respectively, that they just, the team kind of thought they could show up and, just kind of go through the motions and win 3 ball games. But the bottom line is this is the Southeastern Conference. And it is another stark reminder that in any given day in this league, not only can you get beat, you can get embarrassed. And that's what happened to Mississippi State on Saturday. And it's difficult to find a silver lining in any of that, because State, theoretically, you could still win a share of the SEC. But if State had swept Missouri, they're first place by themselves today with 1 weekend to play. So they absolutely blew it in every aspect of the phrase.
If you've got your two seniors acknowledging that they're not locked in, and then they never locked the team as a whole never locked in over the weekend, how concerned should everybody be?
Well, I think this team has good leadership, but at the same time, too, I think the fact that they're willing to admit that is probably important. It shows some transparency, but at the end of the day, it's on them too. I mean, there's some accountability within them as the leaders of this team to ensure, with so much at stake, that this team is locked in. It falls to them. I mean, the coaches can only do so much, but at the end of the day, you and I both know, because we've been there, what happens in that locker room and kind of that, that camaraderie among the team, that sets the attitude for the weekend and for the season. You got to have everybody bought in. And let's remember, too, there's a lot of these young guys, too, never played SEC baseball before, and so they don't fully appreciate how intense you have to be in every ball game, especially down the stretch. They go to South Carolina, they win a series. It was a very difficult series, and you see South Carolina sweep Kentucky over the weekend. I mean, I think in many respects they thought they had it made, and they didn't, and it's probably going to cost them an SEC championship.
What about a national seed? What do you see from the numbers? How do you feel about it? What do they need to do this weekend?
Well, I think at the bare minimum, they've got to win tomorrow night and then win the series, and then hope the cards fall right, because there were a lot of teams in that top 20 of those NCAA regional hosting sites that had difficult weekends as well. I think State still controls their own destiny. Obviously, if you sweep this week, then I think you remove all doubt. I think you win the series, you're still in good shape, but you probably probably a little bit of a debate right there. You kind of depend on somebody else to make a mistake. I think the bottom line is State needs to go to Tuscaloosa this weekend and look to win 3 games just to ensure that there is no room for debate. You got to go to Tuscaloosa. And this is an Alabama team that's pretty good. Got an RPI of 24, so that'll certainly help you kind of help the math in your respect. But all that really matters is that if State goes back and wins this week, they're going to be a top 8 national seed. They'll host a regional and then have the opportunity to host a super regional if they advance. Who needs to get going in the lineup? Maybe everybody but Tanner Allen and Scotty DeBrule. Roddy's been decent. I think I had a discussion yesterday with somebody else that's pretty close to the program. You bring Scotty DeBrule in, you kind of hope and think maybe he's a 2-hole hitter, and early in the year he wasn't. You get into SEC play, and he wasn't quite there. But he has adjusted his approach to play. He's been outstanding. I don't know if you don't shake it up a little bit and move him up a little higher in the order. I mean, you've got some guys out there that are kind of inconsistent, but I think DeBrule is one of those guys. You look at every at bat is an absolute war with him. I mean, he's comfortable in every count. And I never expect him to strike out. When he does strike out, I'm surprised. I just think that he's a guy that really handles the bat well. He doesn't try to do too much, and I think that's one of the things on this lineup that happens at times is there are some guys that don't always know who they are. Scotty DeBrule knows exactly who he is. Now, granted, he's a grad student, so he's had 4 years to know that he's not a guy that's going to hit jacks.
Right.
But I thought last weekend we had a lot of selfish swings. I mean, there were a lot of guys early in counts that dropping shoulders and, trying to hit balls out in the lounge. And, some guys are talented enough to do that. But, when you're down a few runs, you need base runners. You don't need to be up there swinging the first pitch and just F8, F9 the whole ball game. And that's one of the things I think Gotro and Lemonis got to get a handle on this week is, let's get back to hitting line drives, work in the middle of the field, because at South Carolina, that's exactly what happened. State went out there as the aggressor, didn't try to do too much, and before you know it, they're up 2 games and potentially sweeping on Sunday. And just, this past weekend, that same approach I thought was lacking. I thought there was a whole lot of selfish swings and a lot of balls that were just basically non-competitive at bats.
Steve Robertson talking Hail State baseball on the Modelo guest line. They dropped 2 of 3 to the worst team in the league, Missouri, at home. They're still a top 16 seed. They think they're a national seed today. As Steve said, they need to win 3 of 4. To close out the year to make sure that they stay in the top 8 and have a chance to host both postseason weekends. Chris Lemonis, what was his demeanor like after Saturday?
It really, really frustrated, and you could tell, too, I think there was a part of him, too, that I think he was just a little bit shocked. I mean, because that game turned on him in such a major way early on. You're down 8-0, and one of the things I brought up on my show, and I've said this before, and there's a lot of people that love baseball that don't know baseball. And I think Houston Harding in SEC play is better out of the pen, and here's why. And you and I discussed this before privately, but I think Jackson Fristow, you start him as a right-hander, and then they're going to throw some left-handers in that lineup and try to balance things out. Well, then you bring Harding in after he's gone through the order once or twice, and then he can chew up those left-handers. Well, when you announce Houston Harding as the starter, those left-handers don't make it in the lineup. And that's what happened on Saturday is they stacked 9 right-handers in the order, and then the next thing you know, it's 8-0. And so we tried it. It didn't work. Now we can go back and do something a little bit different and go back to what we were doing because, listen, State's been competitive in those Sunday games, and Harding's a big part of that. But I think he is a piece that fits better out of the pen, and I think now we know that. And this whole education of a baseball program is a year-long deal. You don't just throw your best 9 out there the first weekend and then just become, rigid with all that. I think those are the things you look at. You have to kind of adjust, and by the time you get in a regional play, you want to make sure you've got a role for everybody. But I think we're trending in that direction. But it was a very painful lesson and one that could be historic in its collapse just because of the fact that Mississippi State should be first place in the SEC, but they're not.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. What about top-line talent? If Rowdy and Tanner don't come back because of COVID, really got to start asking questions as far as where they'd be. Did it finally catch up with them now that they went through so many coaches And that is extremely difficult when you're trying to commit kids in 9th and 10th grade. I mean, that they went through Cohen, Canizero, Henderson, and Lemonis, and
well,
that there's.
I don't think so. And you know, there probably maybe one or two guys out there that maybe you didn't get because of that, because you needed some continuity. But Gotro's been here through some of all this, and so it's not like that the staff has been unfamiliar with the players. I mean, remember Andy brought Gotro in off the field first, and then he became the hitting coach, and he was here through Gary, and so you've had some stability in that respect where you hadn't had guys show up thinking, okay, who do we call? Who is our guys? I mean, so I think in that respect you're okay. But I mean, you make a good point too. I mean, if it's a typical draft last year, I mean, this is a rebuilding team. I mean, there's no way around it. This is a team that's probably fighting to be 500 in the SEC. Probably a team too that's just trying to get into a regional somewhere to 3. Then that's. I think there's some important pieces kind of moving forward. And you mentioned earlier who are some guys that need to step up. I mean, Kellum Clark, I think, adds a dimension to this lineup that you haven't had. And all of a sudden, he seems to be a lot more comfortable in the batter's box in SEC games. And so I think that could be interesting. And I think left field, you just play as a matchup deal, the way you go through this thing. I mean, before it was kind of a platoon deal between Skinner and Cumbus, but if Clark can handle it defensively, I think you need his bat in order because he's the guy that can turn a game around for you. And I saw something in South Carolina, I don't know if I've ever seen in a college game with Kellum Clark, is, he hit the home run, then he had another ball he rifled out to left. Well, in extra innings, he comes up, and he nearly hits a tank down the right field line. And after a one-pitch swing, they decide, let's put him on. I mean, it's like church league softball. It's like, we don't want to take our chances with this guy. So I think he brings some power to the order, but you just got to find a way to get him in there because you may end up having to DH Cam James to ensure that Tanner Leggett plays at third to kind of shore up things defensively. And you hate to be kind of mixing and matching this late in the year, but I think we've kind of learned through the hard way. This is what's got to happen. Leggett's got to play third, Cam's got to DH, and you got to get Kellum Clark in there against right-handers.
Boy, do they need Cam James to get going or what?
Oh, absolutely. And he's walking a lot, and he's doing some things like that first run in the ball game the other night. He hits the ground ball to the right side, so he's doing little stuff. But, they really need him to go on another tear again, have one of these 7 for 16 weekends, really give this team some confidence. Because, listen, hitting 3-hole, he's going to have a lot of RB opportunities hitting behind Rowdy and TA. And so he is willing to take a walk in that 3-hole spot, but you really would like him to be able to mash in 3-hole spot. I mean, you don't really put a guy in there just looking to move the lineup forward. You want a guy that's going to be able to be an RBI producer, and he was earlier in the year. But I think what happens is everybody begins to kind of break down your game and figure out what you can't hit. And so he's seeing a ton of breaking balls, and there have been some times he struggled to kind of pick up the spin. But I'm still a Cam James fan. I know some of our fans are down on him. People forget he's still a freshman. This is his first trip to the SEC. And so I still expect him to have a big career at Mississippi State. And there's some things you got to figure out. But everybody, even Clark and Palmero, had some struggles early on.
Out of bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, joins us on the Modelo guest line. Hey, let's go to the pitching staff. You fully expect Fristow to be back in the rotation this weekend?
I don't know that I would say I fully expect it back. I would say that's a real probability at this point because I think maybe the time off has been good for him too. Maybe let him watch a little bit and also to kind of rest his arm some. He's a very talented young guy. To me, that combo just makes sense. You throw McLeod as a lefty and come back with Brandon Smith as a righty and hope to get it to your bullpen. And, on Saturday, Bednar has been your most consistent guy and didn't have his best stuff on Saturday, but kind of gutted it through and got a win. And you never expected to be in that situation. But I think you feel better about Saturday probably than at any day than the rest of your weekend. And he's your game 2 guy. And then I think you pair up Fristow and Hootie, and then all of a sudden you've kind of got that whole righty-lefty deal working for you. I think one of the things that needs to happen is, we talk about Landon Sims. He's probably been underutilized a little bit, and it's important to remember that he is a freshman. People say, they're using Cobb so much at Arkansas. Yeah, he's a senior and a former starter, too. He's a guy that kind of knows how to take care of his arm. He's not a young guy anymore and has been phenomenal for Arkansas. But you got to find somebody that can close out a ball game besides Landon Sims. Yeah. Maybe that's Preston Johnson. I don't know, but maybe you don't pair up Preston Johnson with Landon Sims. Maybe you move Landon Sims to do your Friday, Sunday stuff, and then you have Preston Johnson do Saturday stuff. But that's going to have to happen. I mean, and listen, the reason that fans are always calling for Sims is because they know they can trust him. They know he's going to come out there and throw strikes.
Right.
State's got to find somebody else that can handle that on Saturdays.
Do you think they would be open? I think they've done it one time this year, but you've been to all the games. Do you think that they would be open to pitching Landon, depending on pitch count the first time around, twice this weekend against Alabama if needed?
I think you have to. And, they threw him twice, I guess, against Ole Miss. And,
okay.
He's had some experiences. He's told us, in media that there have been plenty of times on Sundays where he's been physically prepared and ready to go, but the game just didn't dictate it. Like there would be an opportunity, a save opportunity coming up, but then State would extend the ball game so they would sit him down. And you don't want to pitch him just to pitch him, and so – if I look back last week, and that's one of the things you look back in hindsight and say, you know what, we probably should have made a call here. When State cut it to 10-8, I think I'm bringing Sims in, even though, you still got 4 innings to go.
Absolutely.
Just to kind of slow the game down. Maybe I can get 2 innings out of him, and then I can piece it together on the back end. But because you feel like, if you could ever take a lead there, you're probably okay. And then ultimately you don't because – as soon as you go back out there, you give up 2 more runs. Now it's a 12-8 ball game, so the whole idea of bringing Sims in doesn't make any sense. But if you bring him in initially, then all of a sudden you can hold the game in place. But who knew at that point, how the rest of that game was going to play out? It's just such a gamble when to use him and when not to. But you got to make sure when you throw him out there, it's an even or an advantage situation, so you get a win. You don't want to waste him in a loss.
And you think they're going to ride with Hancock at first, obviously DeBrule at second, Forsythe at short, and Leggett at third?
Yeah, I think that's the best defensive lineup today. And, we had a stretch there. We played, 3 straight consecutive clean games, and that was the defensive order that you had out defensively. And you got some guys you put in as defensive replacements late, and I think a lot of that's just to kind of keep those guys engaged because you are trading a little defense for offense at first base for trading Hatcher for Hancock. And listen, give Luke some credit too. I mean, we kind of saw him taking some in and out at first. I give Mike Nemeth credit for noticing it first. He goes, hey, notice that Luke's taking some in and out at first, and he had been a catcher the majority of the time. But I think Leggett's a guy too, is the glue guy. He's played every position on the infield other than catcher. And you need a guy like that. You need a utility guy. And I think, when you look at how smooth he is, fielding the ball in the short hop and sell himself firing across the diamond. I think right now he's probably your best option at third base. And so, and again with him, you're trading away some offense for some defense. But he had a couple big hits over the weekend, so hopefully he can kind of get going too. But you've got the pieces. I think that's the challenge for Chris Lemonis now. It's just kind of gambling and figuring this thing out. Okay. Are we going to have to be an extremely offensive team today? Or are we going to have to be a team that's going to be buttoned up and playing it really well and clean defensively? You'd like to be able to do both, but I just don't know that this team is capable of doing that consistently.
We'll leave it there. Steve Robertson, the Boneyard Podcast, 247 Sports, genespage.com on the Modelo guest line. Steve, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
The Out of Bounds Show, an SEC Insider hit this morning, is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent in any of the 82 counties in the state of Mississippi. We're streaming live on the Out of Bounds radio app. Wild weekend in college baseball. Some college football news, too, that we need to hit at some point. Maybe 8:15 we'll jump into that. I know Tom Luganville at 8:30 will do that for 23 minutes. Parrish Alford coming up next. DJournal.com, Ole Miss Insider. Rebs take the series against the Commodores 2-3. They'll now be hosting a regional. What else can shake out as we go into the final weekend of the 30-game SEC schedule? We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Parrish Alford next.